Hello watch enthusiasts! The past month has seen a truly remarkable array of watches released, in thoroughly different sectors, from ultra-thin perpetual calendars and chronographs to arguably the most impressive dive watch ever created. These watches demonstrate both remarkable watchmaking and innovation in a broader sense, with groundbreaking materials and engineering solutions, making tasks such as the creation of the deepest diving dive watch ever made, or an affordable perpetual calendar Rattrapante monopush chronograph possible. However, before I begin this video about 5 of the most impressive pieces this month, I would like to encourage you to subscribe if you enjoy this video or find the content interesting or useful, and also to follow me on Instagram at the address which is now on the screen, in order to be able to access content which is not available here on the channel, such as meetings with other individuals, or seeing a watch that happens to be around in the wild, which otherwise I wouldn't feature here on the channel. The conquest of the deep has remained one of the true marvels of the watch industry, and has long been fought between Omega and Rolex, despite the involvement of other brands such as Doxa, Seiko and Blancpain, which all contributed very significantly. However, despite Omega's significant involvement with diving legend Jacques Cousteau with their Seamaster Ploprof in the 1970s, it has largely been Rolex which has enjoyed the fame. Whilst their Sea Dweller became a more popular extreme dive watch than the Ploprof thanks to its use by Comex and the Hydro extreme depth experiments, their Deep Sea Special in 1960 and Deep Sea Challenge in 2012 both reached the bottom of Challenger Deep, the deepest known point, at depths of 10,911 and 10,898 metres respectively. However, Omega has now officially bettered these achievements with their new Seamaster Planet Ocean Ultra Deep Professional, which has participated in the 5 Deeps expedition. This expedition, directed by Victor Vescovo, has used the submersible DSV limiting factor to reach the deepest point of each of the world's 5 oceans. The greatest depth achieved by this submersible was 10,928 metres below sea level, the greatest manned submersible dive ever. Importantly, to the exterior of the submersible was strapped this experimental Seamaster, which was developed in only 6 months. In order to achieve this, the case was modelled in the style of the Planet Ocean, but with a greatly enhanced size of 55mm in diameter by 28mm thick and in grade 5 titanium from an offcut of the submersible DSV limiting factor. Perhaps most curiously, the case has no spring bars, but instead 2 fixed bars between each of the lug pairs, with a small gap in the middle. The purpose here was to maximise strength with fixed bars, whilst allowing some flexibility with the gap between them. Adding this to a seal around the crystal made not from any rubber, but from liquid metal allowed to set around the crystal at high temperatures, and Omega has created a watch capable of resisting a depth of 15,000 metres, of course with the removal of the helium escape valve due to any lack of purpose for it with a watch of this sort. Predictably, the watch features the caliber 8912 from the larger size Planet Ocean, with automatic winding, a coaxial escapement, and double spring barrels, which has been certified as a master coaxial chronometer with no date. Of course, this watch is not planned to be available to the public, nor is there any currently planned spin-off for purchase. Yet it remains a truly remarkable piece of innovation at the cutting edge of watchmaking, especially developed in only 6 months. This is especially true as one of these watches, lost during a dive, was retrieved still running correctly after 2 days at this crushing depth. This piece is, in my opinion, a demonstration of the brilliant work undertaken by Zenith in recent years to at once celebrate their history whilst moving clearly into the future. Ironically, the watch which spawned this new release from Zenith was their answer to the future 50 years ago in 1969. Of course, 1969 was the year when 3 parties competed for the creation of the first automatically winding chronograph, with Hoyer, Hamilton and Breitling using a Buren-based microrotor movement with a Dubois-Dupré chronograph module to create the caliber 11, and Seiko creating their highly successful 6139. However, the most advanced of these movements was the El Primero movement from Zenith, which was a fully integrated and non-modular movement running at a high beat rate of 36,000 vibrations per hour, and which still remains in a relatively unchanged form today. Of course, history would see this movement used by Rolex, albeit in a modified form, in their own Daytona, though today it is Zenith which has raised it to a position of fame, which they are continuing with this new release. They've decided to release, in a non-limited run, I make very clear, an almost perfect remake of the reference A384. Now, this was one of the versions of the El Primero released in 1969, with an angular and sunburst finish 37mm by 12.6mm stainless steel case, dimensions which have remained completely unchanged in this remake. In fact, the original was scanned specifically to create an absolutely faithful remake too, and the dial remains the same with its grey and black scheme under a domed sapphire crystal to match the exhibition caseback, which still guarantees 100-metre water resistance and the look of the original watch whilst giving you a view into the movement and higher scratch resistance at the front. Crucially though, the movement which you see through the caseback hasn't been changed drastically since 1969 in the form of the Zenith Primero 400, with 31 joules, a column wheel lateral clutch, and of course its famous high beat rate and automatic winding. But overall, this watch demonstrates that Zenith can create a truly superb and thoroughly charming vintage-inspired watch without sacrificing its dramatic push towards the future with the Defy El Primero range, and without falling into the trap which I feel that Omega has fallen victim to in recent years, where limited editions bear little weight due to their frequent releases and very large-scale production. Where there's no pretense that Zenith are producing a limited edition here, it is just a standard piece for their range for this year in commemoration. And so here Zenith have even created the ladder bracelet of the original, a ridiculous edition with folded links which aren't nearly up to modern standards, but which I absolutely love, because it allows this watch to be worn in exactly the same way as the original. Perhaps I seem overly complimentary of this watch, but I don't think I've ever come across a watch for which I'd be more prepared to sell my entire collection to pay the 7,900 Swiss franc price, because it just represents phenomenal value, and also a phenomenal example of a watch brand really listening to what people want. To mark their 15th anniversary, Habring have created their most complicated watch to date, a Rattrapante chronograph perpetual calendar. Yes, like the Patek Philippe 5004, except here you get a monopusher chronograph as well. Now for those who are unfamiliar with Habring, this is an Austrian brand which was the creation of Richard and Maria Habring. This is important because Habring was the man who developed the split-second version of the Veltro 7750 for IWC, thus adding interest to the extensive use of this particular movement architecture by Habring today for their very limited production each year on an incredibly small scale but produced with really exquisite care. The case of this perpetual calendar chronograph is 43mm by 12mm thick in 316L stainless steel, and is polished with brushed sides with a double anti-reflective coated domed sapphire crystal. Interestingly, you will note that this case has only one pusher on either side of the case, giving it a monopusher chronograph with a second pusher on the opposite side to control the split seconds. These hands are differentiated by the use of rose gold plating and thermal bluing. The dial itself is galvanised silver and is grained vertically to contrast the rose gold Arabic numerals and gold on the moon phase indicator, and of course the perpetual calendar and chronograph are displayed via the 4 sunken subdials, whilst the leap year indicator and month displays share coaxial subdials, as do the moon phase and chronograph minutes on this particular style of dial, which I must say I think is very elegant and very much in line with the style of the brand. But as beautiful as the dial of this watch and as elegant as the case is, the internals of this watch really do represent the pièce de résistance, because this watch features a redesign of the classic Veltro 7750 architecture in the form of the in-house manufactured Habring A11P. This keeps the thickness down by removing the automatic winding module, thus making for a remarkably slim grand complication movement, which is only 8.7mm thick. The finishing is, of course, excellent, with blued components and an exposed claw-like mechanism for the split seconds, all of which is given a simple but elegant layer of perlage or graining. The watch has a 48-hour power reserve and of course 27 joules, running at the usual 4Hz beat rate to give you smooth seconds, especially with the fact that you'll be paying attention to them with this split-second Rattrapante complication. Of course, this watch doesn't appeal to the same customer as, for example, a Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar chronograph, or any movement or watch with that particular calibre of watchmaking, because this is a very different product, which with a price of €21,500 is by no means cheap, but still is a fraction of the price of what you'd pay for any other brand to produce such a watch. And of course there is the argument that the movement isn't in-house, but firstly I think that argument is somewhat flawed by the fact that a lot of the large brands have been using non-in-house movements for decades, but also because of the fact that this movement is produced entirely in-house, or by manufacturers specifically for this brand. And so one has a situation where it really is an incredible quality watch, produced by a small team of people, and to a standard which really is remarkable. And I must admit, for me, that really answers the question as to whether this is worth it or not. Some will remember that last year Audemars Piguet unveiled the Royal Oak RD2 Perpetual Calendar Ultra Thin, which was a prototype demonstrating the thinnest automatic perpetual calendar ever made. This watch offered a design which was very standard for a Royal Oak, of course with an incredibly slim case though, with a brushed bezel and tapisserie dial, though only shown in platinum. Now AP have unveiled a full production version of this prototype which, rather surprisingly, takes the vast majority of the features of the prototype, whilst integrating the concept into the existing range. The case is 41mm in diameter by a staggering 6.3mm in thickness, despite the exhibition caseback, and is now available in brushed titanium with a polished bezel and bracelet links in platinum. The dial is also radically simplified, with a blue colour and vertical graining in the place of the tapisserie surface, and there is reduced coloration to individual details too, just to reduce the clutter of this dial, which was previously present. Mechanically, the watch uses the calibre 5133, which is a development of the calibre 2120, which itself is the product of the Jaeger-LeCoultre calibre 920, which also equipped the original Patek Philippe Nautilus. The specifications remain similar, with a 19,800 vibrations per hour beat rate and a 40-hour power reserve, whilst the movement has been slimmed by widening it from 29mm in diameter to 32mm in diameter. This builds on the existing ultra-thin nature of a suspended spring barrel held only on one side and a ruby roller mounted automatic rotor, again to reduce the thickness, whilst moving some of the Perpetual calendar features outwards just to widen the movement instead of thickening it. And whilst the design of this watch is somewhat unimaginative due to its adherence to the Royal Oak aesthetic, it's undeniably a very impressive mechanical display, and is priced at 140,000 Swiss francs, which I'm certain will make this watch a success in the particular market it's aiming for, because of the fact that it's able to state that it can very clearly be the thinnest Perpetual calendar in the world with automatic winding, but also because the Royal Oak really is the powerhouse of AP, and perhaps to the detriment of the brand as well, but of course that remains to be seen. I make no secret of the fact that I have a deep appreciation for the work of Max Buser and his imaginative take on high horology, which is of course MB&F. This really is a brand for those who find Patek Philippe or A. Lange & Söhne overly serious. But today I'd like to take a look at a wonderful new version of my favourite watch from the brand, and one which is perhaps their most imaginative piece to date. This is the HM7 Aquapod, a watch with a truly alien case of 58.8mm in diameter by a staggering 21.3mm in thickness, which, due to its former titanium build and hinge lugs, was actually extremely comfortable. However, for this final edition of only 25 pieces at a price of $165,000, MB&F have chosen platinum as the material of choice, likely increasing the weight significantly. Aside from that, the case with its jellyfish-like appearance, rotating bezel separate from the case, and centrally mounted flying tourbillon under a heavily domed sapphire crystal remains. The watch also retains its low water resistance of only 50 metres, but then it isn't really the point of this timepiece. In truth, it's in the details where this piece really sets itself apart from other versions, as the most striking detail is the red bezel, which mimics the red colour of deep-sea jellyfish. This is achieved with a red sapphire crystal, as opposed to the ceramic of other versions in titanium and red gold. However, if the bezel is actually created from a red tone of synthetic sapphire, rather than a tinted sapphire crystal, perhaps we should call it synthetic ruby, since both materials are both made from corundum, but if there are any chemists in the comments down below, I would greatly appreciate some clarification on this. Aside from this, the rotating rings of Arabic numerals are now three-dimensional pieces of titanium, whilst the tourbillon bridge has been remade in sapphire rather than the usual metal. This adds to the already remarkable details of the movement, with a 72-hour power reserve, 35 joules automatic winding, and a 60-second flying tourbillon centrally mounted. The automatic winding of the watch, with an imaginatively designed platinum rotor, also goes against what you might expect, but is integrated into the design with all the elegance you might expect from this brand. Of course, this is a dream watch, at a price which is utterly unattainable for most, but somehow it's difficult not to enjoy the fact that this watch merely exists, and isn't just a figment of the imagination. But I will conclude this video here, and I'll be very curious to hear what you have to say about these releases, because it has been a month of more expensive releases with a relatively minimal set of affordable pieces being displayed or shown. But nonetheless, I think we've seen a really fascinating array of pieces, and so I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on these watches, if you have any particular ideas. And if you enjoyed this video, then do please like, share and subscribe to help the channel, and also to be able to enjoy more content and videos here in future. So thank you very much for watching. This is the Watch Guy, out.